Good morning and good afternoon, also good evening. So welcome to the COVID-19 Forestry Webinars. And I'm Hiroto Mitsugi, Assistant Director General for the Forestry in FAO, and also Chair of Collaborative Partnership on the Forest. And also I'm guiding today's sessions. So once again, welcome to the webinars focusing on that building back better COVID-19 pandemic recoveries contribution from forestry sectors. So which will run from Monday to Thursday, every day between 12 and also 15 o'clock in Central European times. So that programs is available on our website. The link is posted in the chat box. To ensure those virtual sessions, I'd like to provide some technical information to you. First, interpretation is available in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and also Spanish, and can be selected in the bottom bar. Also, please ensure the name of your countries or organizations appears in the name box. To do this, insert and also correct the name before you're logging in the webinars. If it is not displayed correctly, please log off and on again. Also, please note, this session will be recorded. So, let's start the session for the opening. So now I would like to invite Ms. Maria Helena Semedo, Deputy Director General of FAO. So, Ms. Maria Helena Semedo, floor is yours.
Thank you, Hiroto, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Very happy to see you all joining us today in this series of seminars. Honorable Minister, Under-Secretary General for the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Yu Zenning, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Elizabeth Marema, my dear friend, Head of Forest Agencies, United Nations colleagues, distinguished participants, greetings from home and welcome to this series of webinars on Building Back Better, COVID-19 pandemic recovery contribution from the forest sector. The Food and Agriculture Organization Global Forest Resource Assessment 2020 tell us that every 3 years we are losing an area of forest the size of Italy. These forests, mostly located in the tropic and subtropics, are then converted in pasture land, a field of agricultural crops, a new port, a housing state, a hold, or cleared to make home to dig for oil or minerals. Not all deforestation is avoidable or bad, but much of it is still illegal, and I think this is the problem. Some of it large scale for profit, in other areas, mainly small scale for subsistence agriculture. The State of the World Forest 2020, launched some two weeks back with UNEP, also recently published by FAO, and as I said, this time together with the United Nations Environment Programme, highlight the impacts of both the loss of forest area and of forest fragmentation, the splitting up of forests into many smaller disconnected patches on biodiversity and on people. As we all know, the loss of forests also has a significant impact on climate change. As to this the knowledge that the frequency and economic impact of emerging infectious diseases is on the rise. Nearly 3/4 of emerging infectious diseases and almost all recent pandemics are zoonotic, and we are facing one of them. That is, they originated in animal, mostly wildlife. Landscape changes are major drivers of the or emergence of a number of zoonotic diseases. And you have one of the reasons why we have asked you to join us this week. And the second reason is that COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recession following in its wake pose serious risk to forest, the forest sector, and the forest-dependent livelihoods. COVID-19 is disrupting value chains to towns, cities, and international for wood and non-wood forest products. Unscrupulous people are taking advantage of the lack of control on illegal logging. Migration of people from urban to rural areas due to loss of employment increases the pressure on forests, since they are a safety net for the most vulnerable members of society, providing food, subsistence, and income in times of scarcity. Human health, clear, must be our first priority. But in the midst of the pandemic and in the scramble to find quick solutions to restart the economy, we must not forget the two other large crises that we currently face. The first one, the climate crisis, and the second one, the biodiversity crisis. In other words, we must take the opportunity of the economic downturn to build back better, I would say to build back green, and to build back forward. And so, the third reason we have asked you to join us this week is because forests have a key role to play in providing solutions. Forest is not the problem, it's part of the solution. Managed well, they are a source of economic prosperity and sustainable development. If you protect, restore, and use our forests in a sound manner, they can help to reduce the risk of future pandemics. They can help to conserve biodiversity, provide new jobs and sustainable livelihoods, and help mitigate and adapt to climate change. Dear friends, dear participants, I look forward to be listening to you all this week, describing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on people and forests. But more important, let us be innovative. Let's be forward-looking. Let's think outside the box to help mitigate these impacts in the short term, while at the same time contributing to building a more resilient and sustainable future to achieve the Sustainable Development Agenda. Let us all together join forces to build back better. I thank you again for your attention, for joining us this week, and looking forward for your innovative solutions, how we can find the best solutions for what the world is going through in this particular moment. Thank you again. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Maria Elena Semedo, Deputy Director General, FAO, for your kind opening remarks and welcoming word. It's very much stimulate for attendance today. To the next, Mr. Liu Zhangming, and the Secretary General of UN DESA. So due to his schedules, he will provide his remarks later today, maybe around the end of the sessions. So now I move to the next speakers, Ms. Elizabeth Malum-Lehmann, the newly appointed Executive Secretary and Convention of Biological Diversity, UNCPD. Congratulations, and the floor is yours. So, Madam, the mic is mute. Could you open the mic? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank FAO for convening this important, relevant, and timely meeting. I sincerely salute the work of the Collaborative Partnership on Forest, of which the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity is proud to be an active member. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic clearly reminds us of something that we have often lost sight of, and that is humans are an integral part of nature, and will remain so for better or for worse. That is literally the fact of life, and quite literally that viruses can be transmitted from animals to humans is an empty reminder that our species is not just one branch of a great evolutionary tree that includes millions of other living forms. This crisis serves as a wake-up call to fix our deteriorating relationship with nature and halt the ongoing and sometimes accelerating trends of deforestation and forest degradation. We must also need to address the underlying drivers of disease emergencies, many of which are caused by new interfaces between human, domestic, and wild animals in the context of forest habitat fragmentation and encroachment in order to prevent future pandemics. The Convention's 2050 vision for biodiversity, living in harmony with nature, has never seemed to be so frowned and yet so urgent. We must take this opportunity to build back better for biodiversity and ensure that recovery programs all around the world have strong environmental safeguards in place and make full use of the opportunities in the forest sector to put our economies back to a greener track. 2020 was meant to be a super year for biodiversity, with many global initiatives lined up through key events culminating with the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in China, Kunming. Although the COP has been postponed until next year, many important dialogues have already been held virtually, and others will still occur and continue to be held this year as part of the development of the framework. The delay caused by the pandemic and the intense global focus that has put on nature bonds us with the golden opportunity to increase our ambition. If our encroachment on nature is a problem, nature is also where we can find some of the most effective solutions. Forests have an important role to play in that response. Large-scale deforestation, degradation, and fragmentation illegal trade in wild animal species used for food and medicine, and also in timber and other forest products, all have pushed populations even further and in contact with potentially dangerous pathogens and anthropogenic climate change. All this reshapes the boundaries of habitat for many species, making once uncommon interactions more frequent and opening up new channels of transmission. These interacting pressures create the conditions for potential new diseases to emerge, re-emerge, and spread. As part of a better way forward, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the World Health Organization, and Food and Agriculture Organization, among others, have adopted a One Health approach, which provides for prevention and early detection of disease emergencies in animals or their upstream environmental drivers. This collaboration will help us to better understand and respond to disease transmission dynamics between human health, agriculture, and environment. We know an estimated 178 million hectares of forest have been lost in the last 30 years, sadly. This is an area 3 times the size of Madagascar. It's almost half of which is made up of primary forests, on which countless numbers of species depend on and which are irreplaceable value for the ecosystems and cultural values they provide. In a landmark report published last year, the Worldwide Fund for Nature alerted that forest-dwelling populations have shrunk on average by more than half since 1970, and that habitat loss and degradation, primarily caused by human activity, is the cause of 60% of the threats to forest and forest species. By protecting and restoring forests, we guard ourselves against new viruses that could yet be transmitted to humans. Forest ecosystems harbor most of the terrestrial biodiversity, and primary forests are home to unique species, some of which are yet to be discovered. It is in the diversity of microorganisms, flora and fauna, that we found a source of many of our medicines and antibiotics. As we burn through this immense library, before having fully read it, we limit our ability to discover potential treatments for many of the diseases and health problems that affect us today, as well as those that may affect us tomorrow. The pandemic has also created an unprecedented economic crisis that we know that the poorest and most vulnerable will be the hardest hit. It is estimated that economic contraction caused by the pandemic could push an additional 500 million people into poverty. Estimates from the World Food Programme suggest that the number of people going hungry may double even before the end of this year. If the forest can be a pharmacy, it also doubles as a food store that provides a crucial safety net in times of hardship. For those populations that lost their employment, forests and their many products will provide alternative sources of income. We must therefore ensure that the resulting impacts are mitigated and that rising levels of poverty do not usher a new wave of unsustainable exploitation of forest resources. The report of the expert panel on forest and poverty, due to be released in the second half of this year, could not come at a better time. This will demonstrate the value of international partnership at the interface of science and policy as a crucial channel of information for the processes that such as the negotiations taking place under the Convention on Biological Diversity. I look forward to its findings and recommendations, which will no doubt be relevant to overcome this crisis through the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of biodiversity, as well as to the implementation of the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework when adopted. I look forward to the outcomes of the discussions planned this week. This dialogue, or these dialogues among the international community and among the international partners working on forests are crucial at any time, but even more so now. The annual meeting of the Committee on Forest and World Forest Week are milestones around which the forest community convenes. As we postpone these events, we are equally reminded of their pertinence for international cooperation between our respective organizations working on forests. On that note, I would like to commend Director Ms. Mette Wilk, my former colleague, for the excellent work done by the FAO Forest Division in putting together the state of the world's forest under the theme of linkages between forest, biodiversity, and people, for which was very present. A coordinated response to the forest protection should be a fundamental priority under the CBD's post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And this can only happen if underpinned by a sound knowledge base on their current status and condition. Hopefully, next year, this crisis will have receded and the new Global Biodiversity Framework can be part of the blueprint for building back better. Perhaps we should add the fourth B to that, and thus building back better for biodiversity to guarantee that biodiversity is fundamental for human health and sustainable development. Let us not miss this opportunity to do what is right for our planet and human well-being. I hope that this meeting can therefore mark one of the turning points in our path towards living in harmony with nature and a world where forests are fully recognized for their importance and thus protected. I wish you the week of fruitful discussions and deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marumamurema. So you were very much kind word, and also it's a valid point you raised. Also, I really just looking forward to seeing that in the victories in Kunming in the next years. So now I would like to also to deliver is a good message from as a chair of collaborative partnership on forest from me. So on behalf of collaborative partnership on the forest, I would like to welcome you to this COVID-19 Forestry Webinar week. The collaborative partnership on the forest, in short CPF, consisting of 15 international organizations working for the forestries, and this is the main drivers for the implementation of the United Nations Strategic Plan on Forest to achieve global forest goals and also SDG target as well. As highlighted by previous speakers, the COVID-19 pandemic, entailing an unprecedented economic recessions, has resulted in critical impact to the forest and to the people who rely on them, as well as to the forestry-related economies, including wood supply chain and bioenergies. While our immediate priorities is to secure people's health, but we need to assess those impacts carefully and also should take action against COVID-19 pandemic in the forestry sectors in the mid-term, also long-term range. This is a real challenge for us, but it will also be an opportunity to increase the resilience of the forestry sectors, building back barriers from the COVID-19 pandemic. The chief members have started considering the detailed actions and also medium and long-term strategies in the post-COVID-19 scenario. The CPF, in collaboration with FAO, we highly expect, so this week will offer the platform for interactive discussions on such action and the strategies with a wide range of international audience. Your proactive participation will allow us to move forward to building back better. So this week, we will listen to the government and development partners and also local organizations in the following topics. Assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the forest and peoples, identify disaster response that help mitigate impact on the forest, and so propose the follow-up steps, including policy dialogues, resource mobilizations, and actions, so that they are able to forest sector to help rebuild sustainable, resilient societies. And today, we have the session dedicated to the head of Forestry Dialogue, followed by an information brief on World Forestry Congress. The head of Forestry Dialogue will enable several discussions through this week. And the World Forestry Congress would provide further opportunities for the policy dialogues on the forest. So finally, I would like to thank again Ms. Maria Helena Semedo, Deputy Director General for the FAO, and Ms. Alice Marina Murema, Executive Secretary for the CBDs, for your valuable message conveyed in these remarks. And also, I would like to thank in advance Mr. Liu Chang-min, Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, for the remarks he will convene at the end of the session today. So, I would like to thank you all for your active participation in this webinar that will last until Thursday. So your engagement is highly appreciated, and also please enjoy this week. Well, thank you very much. So this is a session for the opening. So now I would like to move on to the main event on today's. So before starting that, there is a dialogue by the head of the forestries. So we'd like to start the scenario or the scene these programs. So now I would like to hand over the floor to Ms. Mette Wickies, FAO. She will set the scene for this COVID-19 webinars week. So Mette, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hiroto, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, and thanks for joining us this session. As Hiroto was saying, before we start coming into the details about the COVID-19 and the impact on forest and the forest sector in more detail, we thought it'd be useful to share with you a look at the current state of the world's forests. The presentation here today builds on 3 recent sources of information. The first is the key findings of the Global Forest Resources Assessment 2020, or FRA 2020 as we call it. This assessment looks at changes in forest and the way we manage them over a 30-year period from 1990 to 2020. It's a major undertaking, and it looks at over 60 different indicators and involves all of the countries around the world. We normally publish the results every 5 years. The second one is the State of the World's Forest 2020. This is a publication that we normally launch every 2 years with a specific theme. This year, as Elizabeth Murema mentioned, the focus is on forest, biodiversity, and people. And for the first time, we've done this in collaboration with the United Nations Environment Programme. So it looks at the linkages between forest, biodiversity, and people, and it also takes stock of progress towards forest-related goals on biodiversity. And lastly, FAO, like many other organizations, has published a number of policy briefs on the impact and possible responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recession that's following in its wake. So to start with the world's forest and where we are, they cover about 31% of the total land area, or just over 4 billion hectares. They are found from the far north to the far south and are extremely diverse. That, of course, makes it quite difficult to draw some global conclusions, but I'd like to convey 5 messages to you today. And the first one is a follow-up to Elizabeth's presentation and about the importance of forest for biodiversity conservation. Despite the fact that forests cover less than 1/3 of the global land area, they are home to most of the world's terrestrial biodiversity. There are more than 60,000 different tree species, and 60% of all vascular plants are found in just tropical forest alone. 80% of all amphibian species, 3/4 of all bird species, and more than 2/3 of all mammal species all live in forests. And we're not just talking about plants and animals found on land. Riparian forests provide shade and nutrients for freshwater plants and animals. And along tropical coasts, mangroves provide breeding ground and nurseries for fish and shellfish, and they trap sediments that might otherwise smother coral reefs. So that means that the conservation of the world's biodiversity is utterly dependent on the way in which we interact with and use the world's forests. And that's the first message. The second message is that all people depend upon forests and their biodiversity, some of them more than others. Forests provide the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and much of the food that we eat. And they help mitigate climate change. Some 75% of accessible fresh water comes from forested watersheds. And 35% of the global food production benefits from animal pollination. Many of those animals are located in forests. But forests also provide products, livelihoods, and well-being. They provide more than 86 million green jobs, while more than 880 million people collect fuel wood or produce charcoal. And 2.4 billion people across the world in both rural and urban areas use fuel wood for cooking. That's more than 1/3 of the world's population. About 1 billion people depend on wild foods for part of their food security. So that could be meat, fish, mushrooms, or berries. And many of the more than 28,000 plants that we know are of medicinal use come from forests. I think we all have realized here during the pandemic that forests also provide a space for us to increase our both physical and mental well-being as well. The third message is that unfortunately, despite some progress and despite all of these benefits, deforestation and forest fragmentation and degradation continue at alarming rates. We are still losing 10 million hectares of forest each year through conversion to other uses. That's twice the size of Costa Rica, or as we heard, in 3 years' time, we lose an area the size of Italy. And although we also gain some forests, as you can see in the green bars here, the forests we gain and those we lose are very different. We primarily gain forest in temperate and boreal zones, and we lose forest in the tropics and subtropics. Here's an overview of what's happening at the regional level. And if you look at the darkest bars, which show what's happening between 2010 and 2020, you can see that Africa is now the continent that has the highest net loss of forest of nearly 4 million hectares per year. It's followed by Latin America and South America, South America, where the net forest loss was significantly reduced during the last 10 years. Whereas in Asia and Europe, the forest area continues to expand. The main driver of deforestation is the expansion of agriculture, with large-scale agriculture accounting for some 40%, and local subsistence agriculture for an additional 33%. However, the drivers of deforestation vary tremendously between and within regions and countries. In Africa, small-scale subsistence agriculture, in dark blue, is the main deforestation driver. In Latin America, it's primarily large-scale agriculture, shown in orange. And in Asia, urban expansion, in light blue, also plays a role. But deforestation is not the only important factor affecting forest biodiversity. A global study of the relationship between forest cover change and populations of vertebrate species doesn't reveal a simple relationship. And that's because there are other important drivers of biodiversity loss, such as unsustainable exploitation. Applying the Limit Planet Index approach to data from hundreds of studies of forest-dwelling animals worldwide revealed a decline of more than 50% since 1970. This so-called Forest Specialist Index is a new way to monitor what's going on below the canopy. But it's not all bad news, and my fourth message is this. Solutions that balance conservation and sustainable use are critical, but they're also possible. Action to combat deforestation and illegal logging have gathered pace, and countries have pledged to restore more than 170 million hectares of degraded land. The IT Biodiversity Target 11, which asks us to protect at least 17% of land area, has been exceeded for forests as a whole. And more than half of all forests have a long-term management plan. The State of the World's Forest 2020 contains numerous examples and case studies which describe local solutions that combine conservation and sustainable use of forests and their biodiversity. And I would encourage you all to have a look at those. But just as we were putting the final touches to both the Global Forest Resources Assessment and the State of the World's Forest 2020, the world was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we heard messages such as nearly 3/4 of emerging infectious diseases and almost all recent pandemics are zoonotic, so coming from animals. The SARS virus that causes COVID-19 is one of these. We've also heard that landscape change and biodiversity loss are some of the key drivers of the emergence or re-emergence of infectious diseases. So how we treat the world's forest has a very direct impact on human health. But in addition to the devastating impact on people, COVID-19 has a large number of indirect impacts on forest and the forest sector, including disruption of value chains and lack of income from the sale of wood and other non-wood forest products, and from ecotourism. This leads to loss of jobs. Lack of enforcement due to illness or movement restrictions, which increases the risk of illegal logging. Urban exodus. We have all seen the pictures of millions of people leaving the cities going back to the rural areas, the reverse migration due to lack of employment opportunities. And this results in added pressure on the forest, since, as we've heard, they're often the only safety net available for the poor and unemployed. All of this means that there is a severe risk that we will see the unraveling of progress towards sustainable forest management and the Sustainable Development Goals. But the pandemic also opens up new opportunities. We should make sure that we use this time to rethink our development pathways, to reduce our carbon footprints, and to recalibrate our compact with nature, so that we can come up with solutions that address the economic, biodiversity, and climate change crisis together. And forests are an essential part of those solutions. We must protect, manage, and restore forests and their biodiversity so that they can fulfill this role. Sustainable forest management, as we all know, helps maintain and restore habitats and ecosystems. It creates jobs and is an effective nature-based solution to climate change. just what we need in times of crisis. We need to make sure that everyone else on this planet knows that this is the case. So my last and most important message is this. The forest sector must be at the heart of actions to build back better for the benefit of people and the planet. You can all help make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mette. So thank you very much for telling that it's quite a big scenario at the same time, make it some of the frames. So what we are talking about this week. So now, welcome to the participant and head of the Forestry Dialogue. So I'd like to invite our moderators, our CPS Vice Chairs, Mr. Stuart Magnus. He's a Global Director for the Nature-Based Solution Groups, IUCN. So now he's going to just making the moderate this quite important, at the same time, quite a unique dialogue by the head of the forestries. So maybe raise main issues, response need, and opportunities to build back better. So Stuart, floor is yours. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Hiroto, and thank you, Mette. Welcome everyone to the high-level dialogue on COVID-19 impacts on and responses from the forest sector. And my name is Stuart McGuinness. I'm the Global Director of the Nature-Based Solutions Group in IUCN, and I'm delighted to be moderating this dialogue session as the co-chair of the Collaborative Partnership.
That the DG is not good.
Congratulations to FAO for their foresight and agility in organising such an important event when it became clear that we could not actually meet together at COFO. I really think this is a critical meeting, as we should not underestimate just how much the pandemic and the impact of its response will shape our professional lives for years to come. So I would like to share with you two brief points to give some context and frame the dialogue, very much building on what Mette said in her opening remarks. The first is that we should not underestimate the role that forests and the forest sector have to play in the near to medium term. Even while governments are still struggling to manage the exigency of COVID-19 as an immediate health crisis, thoughts are already turning to the imminent economic challenges that will follow. We have seen the forest sector used to help create jobs, including in hard to reach rural areas in past crises, and this has actually happened in both rich and emerging economies alike. This can be efficient. In the United States, for example, in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, the forest sector in some states was able to create up to 6 times the number of jobs that a similar investment was capable of supporting in other sectors, such as car manufacturing. The second point is that irrespective of the uncertainty that currently surrounds the evolution of the pandemic and the aftermath, it's the aftermath of the pandemic, we know that healthy forests and on-farm trees are a constant source of life, resilience, and well-being. Prior to the pandemic, the interest in nature-based solutions to key global challenges such as climate change or food and water security was really starting to gain real traction with decision makers across the world. So there's now a unique opportunity for us to position the sustainable management and conservation of forests as a nature-based solution to help the world build back better. Encouragingly, we can see that many forest agencies are starting to position themselves to address both the opportunities and the challenges. In preparation for this meeting, FAO surveyed countries' heads of forestry to really sort of identify what their responses were to the COVID-19 crisis. Here's just a few highlights from the 30 responses that were provided. And they show that approximately 60% of forest agencies are developing response plans to COVID-19 and implementing some associated actions. The most common measure, as we can see here in this slide, is that these are likely to be framed in the near and medium term. And measures include awareness and information campaigns on the risks and measures to continue operations. 80% of respondents highlighted that. Support to community-based associations and farmer associations, and grants or subsidized loans to informal enterprises and the self-employed, and in addition to tax exemptions for small and medium-sized enterprises. Second slide, please. While the near to medium-term responses are understandably the most well-developed, over 3/4 of respondents are also thinking and planning on how they will address longer-term impacts, including how they will monitor any impacts to future stimulus measures. Now, this is going to be a challenge that all forest departments will eventually need to embrace. And finally, there appears to be further scope. Next slide, please. Finally, there appears to be further scope for a more comprehensive response from the forest sector writ large. At best, only 1/3 of the broad forest sector would appear to be fully engaged in the national response at the minute. So there is scope, and it still remains, to better position forests and the broader forest sector for both immediate and longer term national responses. Over the course of this week, we will look at many of these issues in detail. The objective of this dialogue is to begin to more clearly frame what those issues are and how different countries and different regions are responding to them. Today, we'll hear about approaches to addressing the immediate challenges to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to gain insights on medium and long-term strategic responses and innovations. Options for concrete next steps at national level will be discussed, as well as the type of support that would be most useful from the international community. Now, for this and to guide us through framing these issues, we are very lucky to have 5 high-level panelists, and I'm going to briefly introduce them to you. Mr. Pamphile Ntanga is the head of FECA Probois, a Cameroonian federation of small and medium-sized forest enterprises. And Mr. Ntanga is going to share the perspectives from the forest production sector. We have Mr. Leon Jorge Castaños, who is the Director General of Mexico's National Forestry Commission, and he's going to give his perspectives from that of the national agency. We've also got Ms. Bharati Pathak, Chair of the Federation of Community Forest Users of Nepal, FICAFund, and Ms. Pathak is going to share her perspectives from a forest farmer producer organization point of view. Mr. Hyung Park is the Assistant Director General of Forest Policy and Economic Department at the National Institute of Forest Science in South Korea. And Ms. Morongoa Susan Leseke is the Chair of FAO's Africa Forest and Wildlife Commission from South Africa. So many thanks to all the panelists for joining us today. Before moving to the panel, I'll just give you a quick run through on the format of this session. We're going to have panelists answer a first round of moderated questions and giving their perspectives on different aspects of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we're going to try and make use of some of the interactive possibilities here by preparing a couple of survey questions for you, the audience, to engage with. And those will be posted on the Zoom platform at different times of the event. And depending on the results from that, we may pursue some of the lines of inquiry that you offer up to us. The results of this survey are going to give us the sense of the topics that we want to discuss. And in addition, we would also encourage participants to use the Zoom chat box to send in some questions that you would like after, as you hear the first round of responses, and we will be able to take those. There's a team in FAO. We're going to take those, shape those, and we will see if we've got time. We'll put them back to the panelists. So, without further ado, I would like to start this dialogue. And I'd like to start with Pamphile in Tanga. And I'm going to ask Pamphile, what are the 3 most significant issues arising in Cameroon from COVID-19 impacts that are likely to affect forest-based communities, forest ecosystems, and the forest productive sector? So Pamphile, across to you. Pamphile, I think you need to unmute. Could you?
Oui. Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Regarding the 3 issues that you've asked, the most significant issues and the impact of COVID-19 and its impact on Cameroon, what I could say is that as a professional organization, we've carried out a survey to really appreciate the impact of COVID-19 on the sector and on the SMEs in particular. And in April, and also in June, we carried out a survey with a questionnaire with questions that was addressed to the professionals. And about 70% of the members of this federation answered the question, mainly representing businesses that have between 2 and 14 employees. And 70% of these businesses work for private clients, and the others work based on public sector tenders. Their responses helped us understand that all of the enterprises, the small and the medium-sized enterprises, are impacted by this situation. And this is leading to different situations, a variety of situations. We've seen that the drop in the turnover due to the loss of business, due to the loss of orders, is leading to a substantial loss of production, over 50%, up to 70–80%. There are fewer orders being made. Necessary expenses are being privileged over this, and so that has meant that many of these businesses, woodworking businesses, have had to shed jobs and deal with many issues. But then there's also the rise in the price of inputs. And we've seen that since the outbreak of the epidemic, prices of inputs have at times doubled, even tripled. And just to give you a simple example, some businesses used an input, sort of masks for the production, and now they're no longer available. They've gone up to much higher prices. They used to be sold at 500 and now 1,500 African francs. We've also seen that about 40% of our businesses in the wood processing sector have had to dismiss at least one employee in the last 3 months. And this, of course, is having a very heavy impact on the productivity of the businesses themselves. The enterprises can no longer pay for the costs and the contributions for the labor employment. So that is basically the situation. And it is affecting the wood processing business very heavily since the outbreak of this pandemic.
Oui, c'est bon.
I hope I've answered your questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I think actually that is really insightful, and I think it really brings home the just how impactful this is when you say that production may have fallen, a loss of production between 50 and 80%, and obviously the consequences of that with rising the cost of rising inputs as well. One can see the real immediate challenges that are being faced by the forest sector in Cameroon, and I imagine that may be the situation elsewhere globally. So I'd like now to move from looking at what the most significant issues are to really looking about some of the more immediate responses to COVID-19. And I'm going to ask Mr. Leon Jorge Castaños if he would be able to tell us a little bit about the immediate responses to COVID-19 that have been taken or that are planned to be taken in Mexico, and that have got a direct or indirect impact on the status of forests and forest landscapes. Leon, across to you.
Buenos días desde.
Hello from Mexico. COVID-19 reached us in Mexico at end February, beginning March. And yesterday, we registered 20,000 deaths and 175 confirmed cases, persons infected by COVID-19. 4.4 million infected throughout the American continent. Mexico alone is exceeded only by Chile, Peru, Brazil, and of course the United States of America. In Mexico, neither silviculture nor the cellulose businesses were considered to be basic or essential activities by the government. And now they have been in this situation for over 3 months. There also have been cuts in the budget, so the public administration at a federal level, and non-mandatory lockdown, which has reduced business. Other activities linked to the forestry sector, including the building sector, have come to a standstill. And this has led to a huge increase in inventories of both public and private wood processing businesses, which has blocked basically the cash flow, which has led to a loss of jobs. The forestry productive sector, the woods, landscapes, were already being heavily impacted well before this outbreak of COVID-19. From an institutional point of view, from the point of view of public policies, from an operational point of view, the forestry sector has been disjointed, delinked from agriculture and the other sectors. And this has made it very difficult to deal with the drivers of deforestation, forest degradation, and the loss of biodiversity, desertification, and the impact of climate change. It is estimated that in Mexico, most of land use changes are illegal. And the aim is to expand agricultural land. We have deforestation, which is 280,000 hectares per year per land for the period of 2001-2018. And this illegal logging for commercial purposes has also included illegal logging by organized crime. And this has made sustainable management impossible. Community legal forest management and management in the areas is being done by many communities, indigenous communities included, and some small holders. And these community forest businesses have tried to operate, and the private businesses account for one of the largest businesses from the point of view of added value. At an institutional level, we have an institution that works in the area of development. We decided that addressing forest fires and forest management was to be considered an essential activity, and continue to operate in this way, and to try to really understand what the impacts were. We conducted a survey on the impact of COVID in the forestry sector, and here we have some of the answers. What activities have been conducted in the forestry areas? 49%. We have commercialization of forest products, 46% deforestation, loss of land use, 46% illegal logging, 46% insecurity. These were listed as the impacts. Second question, what do you consider to be the production activity that is most affected in the forestry sector? 49%, to our surprise, answered rural tourism, ecotourism, nature-based tourism. 21% spoke of forest product used, and 26% spoke of wood processing. The next question was, to what proportion do you think your income from forest-based activities has decreased? Well, close to 3/4 of respondents mentioned that between 40 and 80% of their income had been lost. And finally, the last question, do you consider that the health emergency has or will have a negative impact on ecosystem conservation and restoration in the forests? 2/3 again answered from moderately to severely. Now, our institution, since May, has been channeling help in the form of cash to try to help assist in fighting forest fires, paying for environmental services and forestry reconstruction management and community forest management, creating what are temporary jobs in the rural areas, which can help address the loss of liquidity in these areas. We're also trying to look at the solutions that could be viable and can be proposed at to the federal government next August. What we need, basically, is to step up, to bring forestry activities higher up on the public agenda, and to make sure that forestry is considered to be one of the priorities of the Mexican federal government and of society as a whole. We need to identify the linkages between the supply of forestry products and the relaunching of building business, and also the necessary credit for building of homes using lumber, using wood. We're also calling for in the next semester of this year for conferences to put forward projects for rebuilding, reconstruction that put a priority on the use of forests and jobs in this area to ensure that, once again, incomes can be restored in the forestry area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Leon. I thought that was fascinating, and actually a very similar story that we've actually heard with from Pamphile in Cameroon. Again, this significant impact on loss of production, loss of income, and a sense that there will be actually a moderate to severe impacts over the medium to longer term. Again, seems to be a bit of a common story that starts to emerge already. And again, but really interesting, and sort of how Mexico has started to prioritize its actions around forest fire, forest management, and the longer term requirements of really injecting confidence into the sector, making sure that the forest activities are higher up the national agenda, and looking at issues around supply and provision of credit, helping to establish jobs, etc. So I would encourage colleagues now. I've been told by my team so far that there haven't been very many questions. I think already we've got some really interesting insights here. So I would really encourage you, participants, to please use the Zoom chat room and put in questions that we can then pick up in the second round of discussion. I'm going to move now from Mexico to Nepal, and I'm going to ask Ms. Bharati Pathak from Fika Fund to really help us understand over her perspectives from over the next 18 months, so the medium term. What once we're actually past the immediacies of dealing with COVID-19 as a health crisis, and we begin to come to terms with the economic impacts, what does she think are some of the key responses and solutions that will need to be explored or upscaled in Nepal, and particularly from a community and a community ownership perspective? So Bharati, across to you.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you very much. I would like to thank again. I'm going to moderator question, especially facing the many challenges in Nepal producer group, especially community groups and local community and indigenous people are facing the COVID-19 pandemic, especially case of the Nepal. Betterment of the overall health and well-being of the people. More cases of the health issues is not only Nepal, and all over globally issues are facing the health issues in local community and grassroots people. Similarly, management of the unemployed manpower by creating the job opportunity. So many people are coming back from the outside of the country, so more pressure for the forest users group, overall the forest area and the agriculture area. So more people are facing that issues also. Similarly, check the pressure of the return migrant workers. So already I mentioned to the many people coming back in Nepal and goes to the village, and more people are engagement in the forest and the agriculture area. Similarly, optimum and the effective utilization of the natural resource create the job and the opportunity and the livelihood option also. And another issues in this COVID-19 pandemic time, local community and the indigenous people and grassroots people and women are facing the challenge. But similar time, all donors are shifting the like a health area, not supporting to the community people and the local people, and through the community forest area and the support to livelihood and others. So this is the challenges and issues are facing the local producer group. And the opportunity, we are facing the challenge issues and more impact in the directly community level, but we have many opportunity also. Is the unemployed youth and return workers have used skill and the knowledge of the effectiveness utilization of the resource. Many people are coming back in Nepal, goes to the village level, and they have a more skill, and we can use to those people skill in the forest and agriculture area. And similarly, the 15th 5 years plan of Nepal have targeted to the achieve sustainable development goal through the forest sector, utilizing forest resource and the agriculture resource. This is the priority for the National Planning Commission and our whole government, more focusing to the COVID impact also. And another is we have a three-tier government already gone to restructuring process, and the local level government and the province and the federal government making to the community and producer group friendly policy and the act and the program. So that will be more back support the proper utilization agriculture and the forest resource. So that is the very positive and the good opportunity, like a partnership for the community group and forest users group and producer agriculture groups and the women and the government policy program and the budget. And another is the activity conducted by the community forest users group in Nepal. This corona crisis provide them much appreciation, like all government and other stakeholders also appreciation for the community contribution, users group contribution and the women's contribution and the agriculture group contribution. So there are the 100 of sustainable community groups and youth groups and the women's groups and the another community based organization and the producer group in Nepal. These groups are the biggest strength to build up back better after the pandemic. This is the like a good strength for the community network and community groups and the grassroots groups, more partnership, support to the livelihood and marketing and the good production, and the youth, women and the marginalized people can support through the forest sector and the community forestry through and the agriculture groups. So this is the this is the opportunity in Nepal. Similarly, Federation of Community Forestry Users Nepal are coordinating all over the stakeholder and community groups and the different level government. We made a plan. We are going to that way. We are talking to the local community, indigenous people, and the women's group indirectly from local level. So they are making to the plan with the community groups and the producer group and the local government, local community people and the local government is the working the very closely, and they are making to the policy program through from the government side. So this is our plan from the FECOFON side. All over the country we are coordinating with the in this pandemic situation, how can we go to the long partnership with the local government, province and the federal government and the community resource mobilization. And we are talking to the different international and national NGOs and INGOs. How can we support to the community people? They are contributing more in awareness raising and supporting to local government and another support to a partnership they are working. So we are thinking that way from the FECOFON side and the community group side and the other indigenous network and the women's network. We are coordinating from the FECOFON side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bharati. Again, some fascinating, some really consistent messages we're hearing, as we heard from Mr. Castaños, this issue, and from Mr. Ntanga, the issue and the concern about jobs. I thought actually one of your points that was very interesting was this issue of the of what we've been dealing with rural out-migration for a long time, but now we're seeing, as we know often happens with crises, that people come back from the cities and they come back to their communities. So in a way, sort of rural in-migration. And the challenges that provides, there's more people, there's more demand for activities. But also I think, Bharati, I really like the point you made that they're bringing something back as well. They're bringing back additional skills. So there's an opportunity to be able to harness those and to find that. You also made a very good point, which I think is important. We should really sort of take consideration of, is the two key elements: the importance of action across different levels of government. It's not just at the federal level, it's right down to local level, and that there's a key role for coordination between those. And finally, I would actually highlight again, what you concluded was the real potential for partnerships between the community groups, between the agriculture's group, women's group, local governments, really in starting to shape up plans that can help us move through the dealing with the economic impacts and beginning to start to think about building back better. I'm going to take a quick pause here now, and I'm going to ask the colleagues in FAO, can they maybe flag up the first quick survey that we are going to take from the from you, the participants. And we'd really like to know, we've heard 3 superb interventions from Pamphile, from Leon, and from Bharati. So we'd like to know from you, what aspects of the forest sector are most likely to have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? Again, from your perspective, is it the issue of forest jobs, broader issues around forest industry and the state of the industry? Was it new forest investments that might have been emerging? Remember, I thought it was interesting, Leon said that one of the challenges they highlighted was a loss of income from rural tourism. Is it forest protection against fires, degradation, forest loss, illegal activities? Is it forest health? Forest health, should include fires, pests, and disease. Is it the impacts on forest communities? Is it forest role in climate change? Forest role in biodiversity conservation? Forest governance and policy reform processes may have been started and now get stalled, or something else. So if we could open up the, if we could open up the voting, and if you could, we'll give you 1 minute. If you could vote on that, just select, you take a box and you can select what you think are the, what are the key issues. And I believe that we have got up to 3 choices, but maybe our colleagues in FAO can confirm that. So anyway, it's try and get 3 choices of what you think are the major issues, and we will just give that, and then hopefully we'll see the results in a minute or so. I've got a question here. Is it a single choice? My understanding is that it is you can choose 3 options, but I would actually ask the colleagues in FAO to confirm that. Okay, it's a single choice apparently. Okay. Okay, last 10 seconds.
They're saying that we can choose only 1 poll.
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, exactly. So okay, there it goes. That's actually that's quite interesting, and I think again, and this is actually I think really actually very consistent with what we've been hearing so far. Real concern about forest-based jobs, the impacts on industry, and then issues really around about forest protection against illegal logging, degradation, forest loss, along with perhaps the impacts that we were working on of new forest investments. So and then I think after that, really the impacts on forest communities at 12%. So thank you very much. Let's say we'll take note of that. I'm going to now sort of move on to the next panelist from the Republic of Korea, Mr. Hyung Park. And I'm going to ask Mr. Park now, say we've heard sort of about the immediate issues. We've heard about the immediate response. We've heard about longer term, medium term prospects over the next 18 months. So I'm really going to ask Mr. Park if there are general lessons from the 2008 global financial crisis that is the impact. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Let me rephrase that. Learning from the 2008 global financial crisis, we find out that the impact and the consequences of those crises can stay with us actually for quite a long time. And it's highly likely that the impact of this pandemic will stay with us for several years. So in that respect, I'd like his perspectives on what are the long-term and strategic responses, as well as the new innovations that may be needed by the forest sector in order to build a more resilient and sustainable longer-term future. Mr. Park, across to you.
Okay. Most socialists say that COVID-19 itself can be overcome, but the aftermath makes our society unable to return to the past. So we use the term new normal for mentioning the post-COVID-19 era. I agree with the socialist argument. While we are focusing on the impact of COVID-19 right now, I think that it is important to understand the megatrend of global community. From a manufacturing-oriented society that was achieved through the first, second, and third industrial revolutions to the service-oriented society with fourth industrial revolution, the axis of the global society has already shifted from manufacturing to the service industry. Human society is now shifting from a paradigm that seeks growth and wealth to a paradigm that prioritizes safety, health, and quality of life. Resilience and sustainability are being emphasized as these social changes, and the forest sector must respond to this trend. I think that we need to move beyond the past paradigm in forestry. The major paradigm in forestry is the production of traditional forest goods in a sustainable way. But the traditional forest goods, such as lumber, is considered as low value added product compared to the other products from the second or third industry. We need to replace the paradigm of forestry with a system that can discover and utilize intangible resources that will be highly valued in upcoming era. The main factor that South Korea is considered to have responded relatively well to COVID-19 is due to its scientific and technological capabilities. In Korea, ICT, information and communications technology, is developed quite well. In accordance with the technical development, Korean forest sector is proactively introducing ICT using satellite imagery, LiDAR, and drones. Since there are many steep mountains and rocky forests in Korea, the tools are very useful for forest survey and forest management. Although the equipment is still quite expensive, I think that we need to invest more proactively in establishing the ICT system so that young people can enjoy the forest survey the same as playing a game. Frankly speaking, the youngsters do not want to come to forestry industry because it is considered as 3Ds in industry: dirty, difficult, and dangerous. To transform forestry work into a clean, capital-intensive, and safe form of work, we need to establish a forest management system that uses advanced equipment. In the case of calculating the amount of lumber after logging, we Korea introduced a system that analyzes digital images beyond the past format of measurement one by one. To invest the advanced system on forestry, we need to get consensus from public and opinion leaders. Although we talk so much about the importance of forests and forestry, the opinion leaders do not pay attention to us. They might agree that the activities for coping with climate change and biodiversity conservation is important. However, they think that forestry can produce only the low value added products, while public demands much more money to be invested on high value added product producing sector. We need to make them understand that forest and forestry have a good potential to produce high value added products in upcoming era. In new normal, as the digital and robotics industries become more active, more professionals may want to work home with comfortable landscape. I mean, it is time to prepare a high quality mountain village residential culture. For the favorable landscape, we need to keep forest healthy, which can be provided by keeping forest resilient and sustainable with biodiversity. In addition, we will be able to revitalize an industry that allows us to experience the benefits of forest using VR and AR up close, rather than having to go to distant forests. As interest in health issues have increased, it is time to develop a forest-based service programs that connect forest with human healthcare. In Korea, we call it as forest welfare service. Probably, there will be an opportunity to explain the activities in more detail at the 15th World Forest Congress, which will be held in Korea next year. Later, if I have time back, I'll explain a little more about the forest-based service industry. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Park. I find that absolutely, I find that fascinating and actually quite visionary, quite exciting. I think some of the issues, maybe just a couple of take-home messages, but this issue of there is a challenge, and I think Leon mentioned this as well, a challenge that forests are not sufficiently high on decision makers' agendas, and this perception that equates only to low value added. So really starting to be able to reframe and reshape that into a range of high value added products, some of them tangible, some of them exploring new areas. I actually thought it was very interesting, the link you made about as we deal with the broader economy, and one may be that actually you don't see jobs centralized around big cities, but you start to see people move back to rural communities, and therefore the importance of actually having what you call a favorable landscape in which those people work. I thought that was particularly interesting as well. And then of course, really the real potential to make sure that we bring forests into the 21st century by really linking with ICT and the options that provides. So I'm going to conclude this round of discussion by asking Ms. Luseke, who is the chair of the African Forest and Wildlife Commission, to give us a regional perspective. So we've heard about many of the issues that are facing forests and the forest sector in terms of medium and the immediate, medium, and long-term perspectives. And I'd like to know, as chair of the African Forest and Wildlife Commission, what areas do you think can be best prioritized and addressed from a coordinated regional perspective? And also in that light, what type of support do you think the international community, including the Collaborative Partnership in Forests, would be best placed to provide? So Ms. Luseke, across to you. Oh. She's not online. Ah, okay. Sorry, I've just been told that unfortunately Ms. Luseke has not been able to join us. She's had connection problems. So we will then move to maybe a second survey question. If the colleagues could pull up the second, okay. And so, and now this time I can say there is multiple choice, so you can choose up to 3 measures. So, oh, sorry, it's disappeared again. Can we get the survey up? Thank you. You can choose 3. Again, all the participants, we ask you to proactively vote on this. What are the 3 types of measures that you consider need to be implemented urgently to counteract the impact of COVID-19 in your country? And again, we've heard a fantastic presentation this morning about what those issues are. I'm sure many of you can identify them. So if we just look at sort of at urgent measures that need to be implemented now, is it the protection of isolated rural communities? Is it support for from COVID-19? So very much a real health issue. Support for forest communities from the economic impacts. Improve the protection of forest areas. Is it a question of really supporting the current forest industries and ensuring and protecting jobs during the period of the pandemic? Is it to stimulate the emergence of new market opportunities? Maybe touching on a little bit of some of the issues that Mr. Park has just raised as well. Is it to optimize the contribution of the forest sector in the post-COVID stimulus package? Or is it to optimize the contribution of forests to long-term transformational building back policies and priorities? So if you were giving advice to decision makers in your country, what would be the 3 things you would tell them they should really focus on urgently? So we'll give a minute, and I think Teresa will let us know when she's about to close the poll. Okay, we'll see the results now. So I think okay, very interesting. So we can see actually that there is, it's quite a good spread of results. Just slightly ahead is the really looking at creating the opportunity for ensuring forests are well located in the post-COVID stimulus package. But equally, just behind that, the issues around making sure that we can optimize the contribution from forests to building back better, to maybe looking at some of that really sort of innovative thinking that Mr. Park highlighted. Again, the issues of jobs, and not surprisingly, jobs and sustaining the industry are important, as well as really ensuring that forest-based communities are supported with the economic impact. So, thank you for that. And we will, as I say, we'll continue to build on this. We're going to go to a second round of questions. We've only got about half an hour left, so I'm going to ask the panelists if they can be quite quick. I'm going to start actually with you, Leon, and I'm going to ask you, what are the existing response measures that you see feasible to continue and to implement a Build Back Better future in the forest sector in Mexico?
Las voy a clasificar en primer.
Well, thank you. I'll start with those which we consider to be necessary. First, we need to continue to work to make sure that forest activities is high on the agenda of the federal government and all the other levels of government, as well as in society in general. So it's rank in the agenda. The second point is that the forest sector and our institutions are part of the environmental secretary. Our Secretary, the Minister for Environment, is currently addressing to public opinion and the President of Mexico the need to address this relationship between the global health crisis and the models of our relationship with nature, with the environment, which need to be changed. Third point, we need to continue to study more in depth the impact of COVID-19 and the recovery measures throughout the entire value chain, especially focusing on the most vulnerable groups. Fourth, we need to work in coordination with the health authorities and the labor sector authorities to have protocols in place that will make it possible for the forest sector to operate in conditions of safety in what is the new normal. Other actions that are feasible: we need to improve the legal framework of the forest sector in our country. We have a project for the sector that was bottom-up, community-based, calling for changes to the current forest law to improve the law. And this draft bill is currently before the Chamber of Deputies, and we're hoping that it will be passed by Parliament. The second line of action, which we think is very important, is a transition towards a territorial focus and cross-cutting activity, so integrated territorial landscape management in the rural area. We need to relaunch our Red Mass national strategy, and we need to move from isolated sectorial visions and bureaucratic approaches towards multi-sectorial approaches that are regional or at the level of watersheds, smaller watersheds, those areas where the producers are the driving force, the main actors in the design and in the implementation of the projects. Our institutions must be present in the field. They must promote regional and local activities that are close to the users being the small-scale farmers, the indigenous peoples, and that can help provide the support that is needed to improve the technical capacity, as well as the governance, the business activities, and that can bring new energy and new strength to an approach that is less bureaucratic and more operative. We need 3 different levels in these cross-cutting activities. The first, at the level of our institutions, and that will include community forest management, protection against forest fires and pests and diseases, environmental services, restoration, reforestation, productive reforestation, and agroforestry and forestry planting. That's the first level. The second level is that in a sectorial approach, we need to look at the different environmental aspects linked to water, to the protected nature reserves, from the point of view of climate change. And the third, which may be aspirational, but it is a target for us, we have to go towards a more multi-sectoral approach so that we can work with federal government and those ministries that are relevant for agriculture, livestock breeding, and forestry management in the framework of the agroforestry programs, bringing the requirements of the indigenous peoples along with the municipalities and local government. We need to foster interaction between forestry ecosystems, land and water resources, with agricultural areas with adopting sustainable practices and work together, pool our efforts to reverse the drivers of deforestation, degradation, loss of biodiversity, land erosion, and mismanagement of water resources. We need this transition to certified agricultural production, agriculture that is free of deforestation in an approach focused on agroecology. We have resources. Some of these, however, have led to major deforestation in our country. I'm thinking of avocado growing or soya. We need to work with those production areas and convert livestock production so that we can reduce the erosion and use of land and support agroforestry-based systems in agriculture to be able to preserve land, grow maize and other systems. There is the system in Mexico which is based on maize and fruit trees raising at the same time, growing at the same time. But we also need sustainable livestock breeding in the semi-arid areas and what we call regenerative livestock management. We need to support projects in our countries moving from the first cross-cutting level to the multi-sectorial dimension with innovative projects for the indigenous peoples that are appropriate from a biological and a cultural point of view. We have a huge challenge before us to achieve the zero net deforestation target by 2030. We also need to work at a national and international level, and we think that it is important and feasible to have resources at a national level and develop these resources with national and international credit, and also support private investment with a social approach in this area. Another area of improvement which we do also consider to be feasible is to provide a strong impulse to an agenda of modernization, of cutting red tape, reducing bureaucracy, and introducing digitalization into forestry management. Also, we need to identify markets that can be supplied through local and regional market production, replacing imports, so import substitution, taking advantage of the new opportunities that are arising, also with the new trade agreement reached with the United States and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon. I think that's very comprehensive. One of the things that jumped out at me was actually some of the challenges haven't changed. In fact, they've just become more important. Some of the issues you mentioned, like really making sure that there's a multi-sectoral approach, that we actually that we get away from a rigid sectoral planning, improvements in territorial planning, improvements in legal framework. These issues have been with us. We know these are challenges. They have been challenges. We've talked about them a lot. But it seems almost that if we are going to build back better, if we are going to move forward, that these become much more of an imperative to address, given you how you frame that. I would maybe now let's go to I've got a couple of questions coming in here, so I'm going to ask I'm going to ask Pamphile and Tanga. I've got one question here. I hope, Pamphile, you'll be happy to answer this, about from a key constituency that, of course, we should mention, youth. And it's so I'm in my 50s. I imagine that the impacts of COVID-19 will probably last the rest of my professional career in one shape or form. But we've got a lot of young people who are just about to start their career. So, and obviously they're going to be maybe working for the first 10 years of their career dealing with these impacts as well. So I think, Pamphile, if you would be happy, could you give us a very quick view on what you think the role and the prospect of youth will be in both the immediate and longer term responses to COVID-19? Pamphile, you need to unmute.
C'est bon, vous m'écoutez?
Can you hear me now? Yes, thank you, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. And you've asked a question that is very important from our point of view. The impact is general, but in particular in forestry, unfortunately the connection has frozen. So this is important both in the rural and the urban context. So it's important to generate jobs.
Vous m'écoutez?
Can you hear me?
Je disais tantôt que c'est une...
I was saying that it's a very pertinent question, the question of youth. Because in general, but in particular in the forest sector, youth is very important. And it's important in the urban area and also in the rural areas. We need to do whatever we can to maintain jobs in this area so that income can be generated for the population, and this can help to improve the livelihoods of the population. So this is a crucial area for jobs, and we need to do what we can to recover the value chain and ensure that young people can have gainful employment in the sector. And the first perhaps solution would be to ensure that now that we have the private sector demand decreasing, it would be very important to have government requests for wood and lumber, and this can be through public tenders. And there should be a threshold in tenders reserved to small-scale producers. And there also is a measure, a law adopt on encouraging the use of local raw materials, local wood in production. Now, this is very important because we need, there's a market there meeting public sector demand, and public tenders can be very important. And for instance, office furniture for government is very high. It would be very important that this could privilege smallholders. And the study has shown that between 2015 and 2017, more than 1,000 contracts using lumber, wood have been published, but out of 2,100 building sites or restoration, we have huge figures. And building, for instance, schools and others. This is the major part of the market. And government is the main purchaser of wood-based furniture and building in wood. So public contracts are extremely important, and that would be crucial in ensuring that jobs for youth are maintained in wood producing and woodworking sectors. So that would be the first area: government contracts, government tenders, privileging youth. We also think another area that would be very important is ensuring the transparency in the sourcing of wood. Young people should really assimilate the values of legal wood sourcing during their training periods. And there are hundreds of companies working. We've now tried to establish a cooperative that will bring them together and support this procurement of legally produced wood, and we think it's very important. And important also in the response to COVID-19, because we see that here that economic, social, environmental factors can come together. And by harnessing these, we can build a more resilient sector, one that can preserve jobs and give hope to young people in the sector. So those are the ideas that we would have. That's how we think that the value chain should be configured to be able to really benefit youth employment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anfiel. And again, I think obviously a key aspect, and again, I think a key aspect in building back better will be actually really ensuring that that we are looking to and supporting the inclusion of the next generation of foresters and conservationists and land use managers, but also actually more broadly actually looking at being able to meet some of the challenges that young people are facing today. And again, Mr. Park actually again talked about some of those issues in his initial response of how we actually could engage young people more, those who are urban based, to increase the interest and commitment to the sustainable management and conservation of forests. I'm going to go now to, say we're almost at the end of our session. I'm going to ask, I think unfortunately we were not able to be joined by Ms. Liseke, which is, so we lost that perspective, which is a shame. But I'm going to ask all the panelists if they could start to think about preparing in a very short one sentence, a key message. What key message would you like to leave? There's a multiplicity of different points of view and issues that have been raised this morning, but one key message that you would like to leave the panelists, and I'll come back to get those from you, or sorry, that you would like to leave as panelists for the participants. And I'll come back to those in a few minutes. But I'm going to turn now to Mr. Park and then to Ms. Patak for their just with two last questions. Mr. Park, for you, a very interesting question here we got from Cedric Mebe, who actually raised the issue of our plan. We talked a lot about our plans and perspectives in terms of immediacy, of medium term and long term. But he raises a very interesting point of the second wave, which we hope will not happen, but maybe a reality. Now, obviously, Korea has been dealing very well with the prospect of and the threats of the coronavirus. What do you think, and what advice would you give as well? We should not lose sight of a second wave and the risk of a second wave. So maybe you could just one or two messages from you on what do you think we need to do in order to make sure that we are, as a sector, as a community, prepared for that.
Okay, as I mentioned before, Korea is focusing on sustainable management, not only just for timber, but for providing good service for public now. As I mentioned before, we need to change our paradigm right now. We are seeking a new way of forestry to make it high value adding industry. Especially we are working more for urban forestry and trying to develop forest therapy, healthcare program more practically. In Asia Pacific region, there was significant increase in visits to metropolitan parks after COVID-19. In Korea, market and entertainment use decreased by 19%, while the use of outdoor spaces such as parks increased by 51% during this spring. The number of visitors to remote national parks decreased by 24% compared to the spring of last year. But the number of visitors to the park near the city center with ease of access increased by about 42%. The demand for visiting urban forest is expected to increase. Urban forests have the advantage of to be applied with exceptions or limited coverage of social distancing. If the time spent in indoor space persists, the need to relieve the increased social stress by use of urban forest or forest will be continued. It is expected that the demand for immunity promotion utilizing forest will increase. The purpose of forest visiting was simply to have a break time in the past or just for taking wood. But nowadays, improving immunity is more pronounced as the purpose of forest visit. The demand for circulated forest will be increased as infectious disease is expanding, which will increase interest in mountain villages and forest attractions that have been neglected due to low accessibility. The demand on forest facilities for improved physical, social, and psychological accessibility will increase so that everyone, regardless of age, gender, disability, can use the forest safely and healthily. In other words, it is expected that not only healthy people can participate in, but diverse people, including patients, will be able to visit forests. The demand for improved access to forests using the fourth industrial revolution technologies, such as VR and AR, will also increase. In Korea, we plan to expand the forest-based service industry to relieve stress through forest welfare facilities such as healing forests. Since the early 2000s, research has proven that forest experiences are effective not only for stress relief, but also for relieving symptoms of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. A specialized forest experience program developed and operated by a qualified guide, forest healing instructor, will be actively conducted at forest welfare facilities throughout the country. Somebody says that forest healing program needs to be operated by medical sector as medical care is treated by them. Medical care is operated by the assistance of medical products such as medicine, while forest healing program can be operated by forest-based service products. As medical experts are the main operator for medical treatment, forest experts need to be the main actor for the forest healing program because the forest ecosystem is quite complicated and delicate to treat. In other words, forest healing program is a good field to create a new job in forestry sector. Once again, I want to share our knowledge and experiences of the forest-based service program in upcoming World Forest Congress, which will be held in Seoul, Korea next year. We are preparing a special session for the topic. For the time limit, I'll see you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parkin. And finally, I'd like to go to Ms. Patak and maybe just focus. There's been several questions. One's just come up on agroforestry. There was another one actually on the role of farm forestry to build back better. So I think I'd like to, Bharati, I'd like to link this maybe back to where Leon left off about this idea of multi-sectoral approaches and really get your view about the role of farm forestry, agroforestry, on-farm trees in building back better. Do you think that is can that make a significant contribution?
Thank you again. Especially I already mentioned before, producer group contribution is the huge. in pandemic situation, many community groups contributing, community forest users group and agriculture group also. So case of the Nepal, now already our three-tier government made a Forest Act and the Forest Policy and the fiscal year policy program. So more focusing to the agroforestry concept. Before was not like that types of the policy. Before Forest Act, we have only different forest area and the different in the agriculture. Not to, that time was not is together. Now is the our policy and the Forest Act is highlighted to the agroforest is very important. Like the inside the forest area and the outside of the private land also. So we can work together like with the government and other partnership and community forest users group and other producer group in this pandemic situation is the very valuable for the forest product. You know, is the we are discussing to the forest based product, not only timber. Is timber is important, like similarly is non-timber forest based product is more important in COVID-19 pandemic time. Our government and our high level respected people also highlighting to the inside the community forest area there is the many types of the wild fruit. We are highlighting to the plantation for the wild fruit, and similarly different types of the non-timber fruits is very important in the forest side. And similarly outside of the forest in the private land also can plant it to the like a different types of the trees and the different types of the non-timber forest products. So this is very important in the agroforestry concept. Our policy highlighted to and the more flexible for the agroforestry forest area and the outside the area. So we need more support to the community mobilization and support to the capacity for the local community, local people, and the engagement for the youth and the women in the agroforestry concept. And like business morality and like good production for the from the agroforestry. So and the business modality, and another is the how can we develop to the forest entrepreneur, like a social entrepreneur. They can play to the role for the plantation and the new products for the forest based product inside the forest and the outside the public land also. So we are thinking, we are more discussing all with our government and other multi-stakeholder dialogue. We are series of discussing different stakeholder how much importance for the agroforestry and timber and non-timber. So all people, all stakeholders are saying to the most important in this situation, not only COVID pandemic situation, of some long time we can go to the that way. And like every restaurant can use to the forest based wildlife product, like now is the using to the many types of the non-timber forest products using COVID victim family and the other every household using to the forest based non-timber product, like basically focused to the health and organic food and other things. So that is the very important. And our government also giving to the priority for the agroforestry concept. We can go to and the community forestry and the all producer group we can mobilize to the that way. And after some time and all community groups can goes to the like a more production and goes to the market and support to the another capacity building and technology transformation. So I like to thank you. Especially the agroforestry is very important in Nepal, and government is giving priority. We'll go to the partnership with the community and the government and other supported organization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, so I think that's a very clear, very strong yes. There is a real fundamental role for how we look at trees, outside forest trees and farms, agroforestry, farm forestry, the community forestry. We're just slightly over time. So what I would like to do now is, I think we've had some fantastic insights. I think there's a real roadmap for action. I hope that over the course of the next week, several of these issues will be explored in much more detail. And as we look at, the immediate response, medium term, the longer term, the Building Back Better agenda. And again, I think the other thing is also being prepared for that we are not through COVID-19 yet, and being prepared for what happens if there is, unfortunately, let's hope not, but a second wave of the epidemic. So I now would like just to collect, as we wrap up here, I would like to ask each of the panelists just for one sentence, one key message that you would like to leave with the participants, with the organizers, and see maybe as seeding into some of the next discussions that will come up over the next few days. So let me start actually with Bharati. Can I start with you, Bharati, and ask you what is your key message that you would like to leave with the participants here and with the organizers?
Thank you. All things is all problem are the temporary. This COVID pandemic will also in some days. We should work together as the team of to the utilization all the forest resource and the build back up better. This is my message. Thank you.
And then I'll ask Mr. Park, what would be your one key message that you would like to leave with the participants?
Okay, I would say COVID-19 gives so many bad things, but it also gives us good opportunity to change our paradigm in forestry. That's my message. Thank you.
And Leon, what would be your key message that you would like to leave with the participants?
Today, more than ever, the forestry sector needs to link up with other sectors and join up with other partners. Thank you.
And finally, Pamphile, what would be your key message you would like to leave?
Oui, merci, Stu.
Thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic, in our point of view, is an opportunity to rebuild the economy post-COVID-19, to rebuild the economies and improve the livelihoods of our communities. I thank you.
So it's up to me. I think this has been such a rich interaction that it's almost impossible to summarize. I'm just there's two little reflections I have though, based on what have been some fantastic responses and insights we've had from the panelists. And I think the first one is that we cannot be bound by the past. That they're really, and I think we've heard this from all the panelists, we need a broader view of forests and forest services. We need to be exploring, there needs to be innovation. There has to be we've got to tap in to a new appetite, I think, in many societies to want to connect with nature. But as Mr. Park said, let's look at different ways of ensuring that connection. The role of urban forestry, the role of ITC. We've got to really make sure that we're actually, as we're working this through, we're working with those who live and rely on forests, the communities, but also the youth as well. And again, in doing that, really starting to try and position forests in a way where I think, I forget which speaker said it, but where forests are not just seen as low value added, but they're high value added. And in all sorts of ways. One speaker mentioned health and mental health. There are lots of opportunities for us to capitalize on. And I would say in that respect, that we were already before the pandemic, we were starting to actually highlight the real role of nature in addressing major societal challenges like climate change. And I think so there is an opportunity for us to really capitalize on what we did before the pandemic around nature-based solutions and build back better. But I think we shouldn't be constrained by the past, but we should look, as the speakers have highlighted, to really think about where innovation, we can find innovation. In saying that, and I think Leon was very clear on this as well, we can't afford to forget, if we're going to bring up new solutions and we are going to be innovative, we can't forget about the key challenges that have held us back in the past as well. A very single and sectoral type approach to land use planning, where we actually, what we need is real multi-sectoral planning and multi-sectoral approaches, really looking at some of the areas that have held us back with respect to legal and regulatory frameworks. We need to make sure that we find ways of getting forests higher up and give greater visibility on the agenda of decision makers. And that many of the challenges that we talked about existed beforehand, but have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. So both those need to, when we bounce back, we need to be addressing those, resolving those, but then I say also not being held by the past, but thinking creatively and innovatively of what else can be done. So I would just like again to thank the panelists. I think that has been extremely, it's been extremely rich. I hope that we'll see several of these threads continue through the next couple of days as we talk through specific issues on COVID-19 pandemic and the forest sector. And with that, I will just say thanks to you participants for spending time with us. Thanks to FAO for organizing this. Thanks to our wonderful panelists who really gave a fantastic insight. And I will now, I think, hand back to the organizers. So I don't know, Meta or Hiroto, do I hand back to you, I think. Thank you.
So thank you, Stuart, and also all the panelists, and quite a good discussion. Also, I very appreciated quite an interactive discussion with the audience. So, and maybe so your outcome may be this week webinars. So I really appreciate your contributions. So thank you so much. So now we'd like to move on to the next brief session for the World Forestry Congress. So I'd like to hand out this matter to the Peter Walker. This is on your turn. I give you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hiroto. Dear colleagues, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us for this information session. And I would like to thank the organizers of the COVID-19 Webinar Week for providing us with this excellent opportunity to share some information with you about the World Forestry Congress. This is a very short information session only, but I would like to inform you that later on in July, we are planning to provide a more detailed explanation on the preparation and a longer period of time to discuss the preparations for the World Forestry Congress. For this short session, we have three excellent speakers. I would like to introduce them right in the outset. You're already very familiar with Mr. Hiroto Mitsugi, who is the DG Forestry in FAO. We have the pleasure to have with us the Secretary General of the 15th World Forestry Congress, Mr. Ko Kian, who is also the Director General for International Relations in the Korea Forest Service. And last but not least, my colleague from the FAO Secretariat, Simone Rose, will present you certain elements of the program. So at the end of these three presentations, we will have a short period of time of questions, perhaps. So I would like to encourage you to put questions into the chat function, and we try to follow those and answer some of them. And those which we cannot answer at this time, we will save for the next opportunity, the webinar in July. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Mitsugi to open this information session. Hiroto, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. And also thank you very much for Mr. Ko to join this quite important sessions. And then on behalf of FAO, I'm very much pleasure to open this information sessions and then toward 15th World Forestry Congress. So which will outline progress on preparations of this global event hosted by the Korean government. And it was planned for May 2021. So while today we have reserved just a few minutes of your times, we hope you will join this future information sessions which are being planned in July next month. So now we find ourselves in a quite unique positions in the history of the World Forestry Congress. Since 1926, the Congress has provided a meeting place for the global forest communities to gather and discuss the emerging issues and identify solutions. However, never before in the series of the Congress have we found ourselves in the position that we are in today. In addition to facing the more familiar challenges which we have faced in past years, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we must now re-evaluate our plans and priorities and think about how to address a new set of challenges. The Congress will provide its way for these discussions, and it will also take place in very significant years. The year 2021 will hold two long-awaited COPs, the Biodiversity COP and also the Climate Change COP. Forests have a key role to play in the post-2020 biodiversity framework, what Elizabeth mentioned before, also as well as its supporting countries to increase ambitions in climate change mitigation and adaptation. In addition, so 2021 will mark the beginning of the year decade of ecosystem restorations. So we aim to enhance commitment and action to preserve our ecosystems and increase our understanding of ecosystem restoration in education and decision making. In this context, the World Forestry Congress aims building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests. This will help to frame and contribute to these global discussions. The Congress welcomes a broad range of stakeholders' participations and seeks input from all actors, from state to non-state, civil societies, academias, and private sectors on how to build back better through these quite big, important partnerships. As a communities, so we stand ready to face these challenges and come together in this historic time to work with all partners and the stakeholders for forest and for our futures. The upcoming 15th World Forestry Congress will have us unique opportunities to do this. But at the end, is my expectation and I really hope is to be able to come together to physically meet participants in Seoul, Korea in 2021. So I really appreciate all your support in the future. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Hiroto, for setting the scene. And as you said, indeed, this is a huge opportunity and challenge at the same time. And this is my pleasure to announce to you, Mr. Ko Ki-eon, Secretary General of the World Forestry Congress, to inform us about the preparations and the achievements so far. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. My name is Gyun-go, and by taking this opportunity, it is my great privilege to give this presentation to you all. It will be a brief, but expect to attract colleagues to come to the next year's Congress. let me briefly introduce our logo and the official website. First, I would like to show the logo. You can see on the screen, which represents a human with nature rooting a traditional Korean symbol as taeguk, which describe a balance in the universe. And we have launched an official website, and further information or key date will be announced through this website. Please note the address WFC 2021 korea.org. The venue for the Congress will be COEX, located in the central part of the capital city of Seoul, where stopped by a cluster of the skyscraper surrounded. It is comprised of 4 stories with 36,000 square meters of space. Space can be divided into 12 separate species, including a convention hall with a space for up to 7,000 people, accommodating at the same time. There will be 55 rooms equipped with state-of-the-art equipment and operated by a cutting-edge building management system. I would like to show the brief floor plan. There are exhibition hall and lounge for participants in the first floor. There will be a VIP lounge and office for Korea Forest Service and the FAO Secretariat in the second floor. Major events will be held on the third floor, including opening and closing ceremony. The first floor will be mainly for the media center. I would like to show the visual concept for the stage during the event. This is a visual concept for the backstage of the opening and the closing ceremony in the grand ballroom. This is a different kind of visual concept for the back wall of the conference rooms. This is a visual concept for the lounge, including a cafeteria, internal lounge, and cultural centers. Let me introduce transportation and accommodation near the venue. This page shows you how to transport from the airport to the venue. There are 3 different lines available, which are running every 15 to 25 minutes. In addition, we are considering free shuttle bus from the airport to the venue at a specific date and time. There is a wide range of the accommodation available near the venue. Most of the hotels are located at walking distance or easily accessed by public transportation. You can make your own choices for business hotel from 2 stars up to 6, the luxurious ones. At last, but most important thing, as COVID-19 preventions. In preparation of the convention, since the coronavirus outbreak from early this year, I think the preventive measure on COVID-19 is the essential point that we as a host countries should be very cautious in sanitation and in preparation for the Congress. A full and robust epidemic prevention effort as disinfection and sterilization procedures will be conducted during the Congress. Let's just see this short video for the sound and clear understanding of how we are preparing in response to COVID-19 situation. Please play the video for sharing.
Hello everyone, I'm Yezra Kim and I work for COEX Convention team. Today I'm going to show you how we at COEX Convention Center do K-Quarantine. So here I am at Korea Landscape Garden Expo. This is the first exhibition taking place in the COEX after the COVID-19 outbreak. Thus we have made thorough provisions not
Sorry, can't you see? Can't you watch? Please wait in a minute.
Hello everyone, I'm
Sorry for any inconvenience.
Yezra Kim and I work for COEX Convention team. Today I'm going to show you how we at COEX Convention Center do K-Quarantine. So here I am at Korea Landscape Garden Expo. This is the first exhibition taking place in the COEX after the COVID-19 outbreak. Thus we have made thorough provisions not only for the event itself, but also to create a safe and sterile environment. So today I'll take you behind the scenes to show how COEX is putting its K-Quarantine policies to work. Under the current COVID-19 circumstances, COEX exhibitions follow at the three-phase disease prevention menu. First, on the preparation stage, COEX ensures the following. Next, let's take a look at the disease prevention system while the event is going on. Our staff also take care of these issues inside the exhibition hall. Finally, let's take a look at the third phase, where companies dismantle their exhibitions once the event is over. So that was the three-phase disease prevention manual COEX has put into place to combat COVID-19. But the most important countermeasure is consideration of all our visitors who take care of their own hygiene from the moment they arrive until departure. Your consideration is what makes a successful exhibition at COEX. As K-Quarantine set the new standard for the global exhibition disease prevention protocols, COEX will strive to be the model convention center of K-MICE and promise to set an example in this post-COVID-19 era.
This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for sharing your valuable time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ko. This has been very impressive, and we were very happy to see that we will be in good hands, not only in terms of facilities, but also in terms of considerations regarding the COVID pandemic. As dear colleagues, as you are aware, FAO's responsibility for the Congress includes the development of the technical program. We are doing it in a very close collaboration with KFS, the Korea Forest Service, and now I would like to invite my colleague Simone Rose to update us on how far we proceeded on this. Simone, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that you can follow the presentation along with me. Does everyone see the screen? Peter, can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Unfortunately, I can't. Neither confirm nor to see. It's there now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry about that. It is indeed my pleasure on behalf of the World Forestry Congress Secretariat to provide a very brief overview of the program preparations to date. Discussions on the theme of the Congress, as well as the sub-themes that will lead the technical discussions of the Congress, commenced in March of this year and have just been finalized. And these will be published on the official Congress website that the Secretary General has just mentioned later this week. The Secretariat has greatly benefited in these discussions from the knowledge and the expertise of the members of the Advisory Committee, the consultative group of the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, the colleagues at the Korea Forest Service, and our own colleagues within the FAO Forestry Department, both at headquarters and in the decentralized offices. The ADG has already mentioned the theme, and you can see it in the banner of the presentation. The theme is Building a Green, Healthy, and Resilient Future with Forests. And as we have heard in the previous discussions, and as alluded to by the ADG as well, the next World Forestry Congress will provide a unique opportunity for discussions on the state and the future of world forestry, particularly in the context of the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, while at the same time striving to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The theme asserts that forests must be an integral part of any discussions and decisions to be made on post-COVID-19 rebuilding efforts and sustainable development in general, because this will determine the health, well-being, and stability of not only our planet, but also its people. The 6 sub-themes of the Congress that you see on the screen include what we believe to be the most important current issues related to forests and the products and services that they provide. It is our hope that discussions under these sub-theme sessions will showcase the role of forests in the global development agenda, and more importantly, to identify key and innovative measures and recommendations that must be put in place to enhance the critical role of the forest sector in addressing global economic, social, and environmental development. Now, while time doesn't permit me to go through the sub-themes in detail, I'd quickly like to point out that they cover topics from deforestation and forest degradation as sub-theme 1, climate change action and biodiversity conservation in sub-theme 2, financing, innovation, and the contribution of forests in general to economic development will be covered in sub-theme 3. The importance of forests in human health and well-being, which we heard in the previous session being something very important. This will be covered under sub-theme 4. Collecting, managing, and effectively communicating forest information, particularly to our policymakers and the general public, will be discussed under sub-theme 5. And sub-theme 6 will look beyond the physical and policy boundaries of forests to foster partnerships and enhance cooperation across sectors for improved management of natural resources. We heard in the wrap-up of the previous section the importance of having a broader view of forests and forestry, and it is our hope that this will be discussed under this sub-theme. As I mentioned before, the theme and the sub-themes will be published later this week on the official Congress website. There you will be able to find additional information on the rationale for the selection of these sub-themes, as well as the topics that will be included for discussion under the sub-theme sessions. I'd just like to highlight a few other key dates that it would be important for you to take note of. First is the process of identification of keynote speakers and invited papers. This will also commence this week. And having had just a very quick glimpse of the theme and the sub-themes, I would invite you, if you have suggestions of persons who you believe could deliver headline presentations or papers, to share these suggestions with the Secretariat. The open call for side events, voluntary papers, posters, and videos will be opened from early July and run through the end of August. And again, here, while I again urge you to take note of these dates and share them with your constituents in the event that they may want to make a contribution to the Congress through any of these formats. We hope to have the final draft of the full Congress agenda available in early December. And most importantly, participant registration for the Congress will be open in August. Early bird registration will close at the end of November, so all prospective participants are encouraged to take advantage of the reduced fees of early bird registration and register before the 30th of November. We've still got a long way to go to get ready to May 2021, and we are grateful, as the chair mentioned, to the organizers of this webinar series for affording us the time to briefly share developments on the Congress. But do note that we will organize a dedicated webinar on the World Forestry Congress on the 14th of July, where we will provide more details on the program, on logistics, and on further opportunities to participate in the Congress. So please do save this date. Further information will be shortly forthcoming. Now, while we're still at the genesis of preparations, we do encourage you to share any input that you may have, any suggestions at all on any issues related to the upcoming World Forestry Congress with members of the Secretariat through the email addresses on the screen. The official email addresses for Congress correspondence will be made available shortly on the Congress website. The URL is in the lower part of the screen, and so we do encourage you to visit the site for more updated information. And with that, Chair, I've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you all in Seoul.
Thank you very much, Simone. I would like to thank all the presenters for the excellent presentations and introductions. As you might have noticed, many of the issues that are suggested to be on the agenda are directly responding to the discussion we just had before this session, and the issues that were identified by the colleagues from all over the world are in due consideration for being discussed in the Congress as well. And certainly this is not by accident, because we have been supported by a large number of experts from around the world through different advisory committees. Dear colleagues, as I don't see any questions in the chat, I would like to thank you for the attention. I would like to thank my colleagues for the presentations and draw your attention to the webinar that will come in July with further details, and give the floor back to Mr. Mitsugi. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Peters, and also thank you, Mr. Cole, and also Simone, and then quite a lot of information. So we had now. So let's see again in the Seoul in the next years physically. So thank you very much. So now I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Liu Chang-min, Under Secretary General of the UN Desert, who just joined this meeting. So thank you for waiting the time, and I very much appreciate your time, even that you're so busy. So now I would like to welcome you, and then so floor is yours. Mr. Liu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mitsuki. Dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank FAO for the kind invitation, and I'm pleased to deliver remarks at this important webinar after engaging dialogue among heads of forestry on the impacts of COVID-19. And the multi-layered impacts of the global pandemic continue to unfold. We are yet to see its full extent, but we know that this pandemic will almost certainly exacerbate global poverty for the first time since the 1990s. Recent analysis by UNDESA, by my department, UNDESA, indicates that loss of jobs and income as a result of the pandemic will likely push around 34 million more people into extreme poverty in 2020. In the worst case scenario, 160 million more could face extreme poverty by 2030. In the wake of the pandemic, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has referred to COVID-19 pandemic as an unprecedented wake-up call to build back better. In this regard, the UNDESA continues to closely monitor and help member states navigate and the informed policy choices ahead. Among other response measures, we have produced over 20 policy briefs and convened a series of webinars on the socio-economic impacts of the pandemic. As the world responds to this crisis, there's a unique opportunity to align the recovery towards greater sustainability and a greener, more inclusive economy, particularly through forests and other ecosystems. Indeed, if the aspiration for green COVID-19 recovery is to materialize, healthy forests must be prioritized. We're all aware of the importance of forests and trees in our survival and health. Sustainably managed forests can play a vital role in lifting millions of people out of poverty and in building resilient economies that can withstand pandemics, biodiversity loss, and climate change. Forests also provide income and livelihoods for rural populations, particularly for indigenous peoples and other forest-dependent communities. And they provide a natural buffer against transmission of zoonosis and thereby reducing the risk of future pandemics. To support public health, the forestry sector is among the key industries to produce essential products and services. Indeed, they are at the forefront of human health, animal health, and environmental health. Thus, it is essential to ensure that forests continue to play a central role in supporting the One Health approach. For this to happen, governments, immune system, and other partners must take decisive action to build forest-based solutions into their COVID-19 responses. Colleagues, to realize our vision enshrined in the UN Strategic Plan for Forests 2030, we must use this opportunity to accelerate action to, number one, tackle the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation. Second, to find the balance between economic growth, social progress, and environmental sustainability. And third, to improve governance so as to deliver on the promise of a greener future. To ensure such actions, we must be alert to the risk of reduced investments in forest management in the short term due to focus on the health and economic crisis. In this regard, we need to ensure that sustainable forest management strategies are integrated into green recovery and stimulus packages. These should build on the interlinkages between forestry and other sectors, especially health, agriculture, employment creation, and the environment, in order to attract investment in sustainable forest management. And efforts are needed to strengthen the capacity of countries to mobilize resources and unlock private finance through mechanisms such as green bonds, guarantees, and encouraging zero deforestation commitments. If we attain the global forest goals of the strategic plan by 2030, we will have reversed the loss of forests and increased them by 3% globally. This would be the equivalent of 120 million hectares of forests. By 2030, we will also have sustainably managed all types of forests and trees across countries and regions. This would mean eradicating extreme poverty for all forest-dependent people and maximizing their contributions to the SDGs, the post-2030, post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and the Paris Agreement. Moving forward, implementing solutions at sufficient scale can only be made possible with the mobilization of expertise, technologies, and financial resources at a scale. These will require sustained political will and public support. In this regard, I'm pleased to share that UN Forest Forum is advancing its work to finalize the draft resolution of UN Forest Forum 15 through a series of virtual consultations over the last 3 months. Once adopted, the resolution will provide guidance for the work to be undertaken by countries, the collaborative partnership on forests and its member organizations, as well as other partners. These will include activities to assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on forests for consideration at the UN Forum Forest 16 in 2021. Distinguished participants, in closing, I wish to emphasize that my department, UNDASA, remains strongly committed to supporting recovery efforts from the current global crisis and in partnership with member states, young entities, businesses, and civil society stakeholders in the acceleration of the implementation of the Young Strategic Plan for Forest 2030 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Liu Chang-min, the Secretary General UNDASA. So I very much appreciate your big insight and also point out several items related to the forestry, and also particularly that so that UNDASA's commitment to working for the forest. This is quite encouraging to us. So I very much looking ahead and see again that in the UNFF 16 next year 2021 physically. So anyway, so I really appreciate today's your participation and also suggestion to us. I really thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish the webinar success. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So so now is almost the time for closing this first day sessions. So I thank you for all speakers today and also panelists and moderators and your good work and also contribution to us. It is quite essential, also critical to this week. And also I thank all your audience, your active participation in these webinars. So already you know well that what every speaker said, but one of the most important things I just picked up today, this is a key message from the panelists on the head of Forestry Dialogues. So building bugbears, and also this is a big opportunities for partnerships, and also changing of the paradigm shift, and also rebuild the rural economies. This is quite a big area to be discussed in maybe in the coming each thematic sessions. So, and I'm very much looking ahead and forward to hearing further discussions on this. So, also I just remind again, please look at our website and to confirm this week's schedules. I'm waiting that your participation again from Tuesday to Thursday. So, I thank you, audience, for attending this session, day 1, and see you tomorrow, and good day, and good evening, and goodbye. Thank you.